My name is Carol Peterson, I'm 62 years old. And my son and his wife told me I would ruin Christmas after I spent 3 years of my life paying their mortgage. Before I tell you how one phone call to my lawyer led to the bank taking their dream home, I'd love to know where you're watching from in the comments below. It all happened on a Tuesday 1 week before Thanksgiving. The first snow of the season was just starting to fall outside my kitchen window in Maple Creek, Ohio, little white flakes dancing in the gray afternoon light. I was humming to myself, planning my Thanksgiving menu, thinking about the pecan pie Kevin had always loved since he was a little boy. That's when my phone rang. Seeing Kevin's name flash on the screen brought a smile to my face. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, my voice warm. "I was just thinking about you." "Hey, Mom," he said. His voice was off, tense. I could hear it immediately. I've been his mother for 35 years. I know the sound of his joy, his sadness, and his fear. This was something else. This was strained. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my own cheerfulness deflating like a popped balloon. "Yeah, everything's fine," he said too quickly. The classic response of someone for whom things are absolutely not fine. "Listen, I'm calling about Christmas." My heart gave a little flutter of excitement. "Oh yes. I was wondering what the plan was. Are we doing it at your place again, or at the Vanderbilts?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, so long that I thought the call had dropped. I could hear a faint sound like him clearing his throat. "Mom," he started, his voice lower now. "Tiffany and I were talking, and her parents are hosting this year. It's going to be a really big formal affair." "Oh, that sounds lovely," I said, though a small knot of dread was beginning to form in my stomach. I knew what formal affair at the Vanderbilts meant. It meant I'd feel out of place in my best dress, surrounded by people who measured a person's worth by the brand of their watch. "Yeah, well, that's the thing," Kevin stammered. "It's mostly their business partners and, their crowd. Tiffany thinks we think it might be awkward for you." The knot in my stomach tightened. "Awkward? Why would it be awkward? I'm your mother." He let out a frustrated sigh, a sound I knew all too well. It was the sound he made when he didn't want to have a difficult conversation. "It's just different, Mom. And Tiffany's mom is very particular about her guest list." He took a breath, and then he delivered the final blow. The words that would echo in my head for weeks. He was quoting his wife. I knew it instantly. I could practically hear Tiffany's sharp, polished voice behind his words. "Honestly, Mom," she said. "Frankly, Carol would ruin the ambience. She thinks you just don't fit in. You don't fit in." The phone felt heavy and cold in my hand. The humming in my head stopped. The world outside my window seemed to go silent, each snowflake falling in slow, deliberate motion. I stared at the wall, at a framed photo of a 5-year-old Kevin on my late husband Frank's shoulders. Both of them were grinning from ear to ear at a county fair, their faces sticky with cotton candy. The woman who raised that boy, who held him through asthma attacks in the dead of night, who worked 60-hour weeks to send him to college, that woman didn't fit in. "Mom? Are you there?" Kevin's voice was small, tinged with a guilt he was clearly trying to suppress. I took a slow, steadying breath. I expected to feel tears welling up. I expected my voice to crack. But it didn't. Instead, a strange icy calm settled over me. It was a clarity so profound it felt like a physical shock. In that moment, 35 years of sacrifice played out in my mind like a movie reel on fast forward. And I saw it all for what it was. "I see," I said, and my voice was perfectly level. Frighteningly level. "Thank you for letting me know, Kevin. I wouldn't want to ruin the ambience." "Mom, it's not like that." He started to backpedal, but I cut him off. "No, it's exactly like that," I said, the ice in my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You've made yourself perfectly clear. Enjoy your Christmas." I hung up before he could say another word. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I placed it gently back on the counter. I stood there for a long time watching the snow fall, watching it cover the dead leaves in the yard with a pristine white blanket. Kevin thought I would be devastated. Tiffany thought I would quietly accept my place on the sidelines, just like I always had. They both thought this was the end of the conversation. They were so wrong. That phone call wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of their downfall. And it all started with a love that had cost me everything. How did I get here? How did the boy from that photograph become the man on the phone? It started, as these things always do, with love. My husband, Frank, was the love of my life. A kind, hardworking man who could fix anything and whose laugh could fill a room. We weren't rich, but we had a life full of love in our little house here in Maple Creek. We had Kevin, our only child, our whole world. When he was diagnosed with severe asthma at age 3, I didn't think twice. I left my full-time nursing position to work part-time, arranging my shifts around his needs, so I could be there for the late-night breathing treatments and the terrifying rushes to the emergency room. After Frank died of a heart attack when Kevin was just 20, it was just the two of us. The life insurance barely covered the funeral and the rest of the mortgage. I was shattered, but I looked at my grieving son and knew I couldn't fall apart. For him, I picked up extra shifts at the hospital. Overnight shifts, holiday shifts, the ones nobody else wanted. I drove our 15-year-old Ford until the floorboards threatened to rust through. Every spare dollar from my salary went into his college fund. I wanted him to have a better life. A life without the financial struggles Frank and I had known. And he did it. He graduated with an engineering degree, the first in our family. The day he got his diploma, he hugged me so tight and said, "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom." Those words were my fuel. They were my reward. They made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. I thought that bond, forged in grief and sacrifice, was unbreakable. I thought nothing and no one could ever come between us. But I was wrong. I was about to learn that some bonds aren't built on love, but on opportunity. And a storm was coming, one I never saw, one that would test everything I thought I knew about my son and about myself. A storm, and her name was Tiffany Vanderbilt. Kevin met Tiffany Vanderbilt during his second year at the tech firm. She was in marketing, and according to Kevin, she was amazing. She came from one of the wealthiest families in the next county over. Her father was a real estate mogul who built sprawling gated communities with names like the Estates at Willow Creek and Falcons Ridge. Her mother was a society woman known for her extravagant charity galas. They moved in circles I only read about in the local paper. The first time he brought her home for dinner, I knew. I knew from the moment she stepped out of her gleaming white Lexus, wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than my entire monthly pension. She was beautiful, I couldn't deny that. Tall, blonde, with perfectly manicured nails and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom, this is Tiffany," Kevin said, beaming. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Carol," she said, her handshake light and brief, as if she were afraid to catch something. She glanced around my modest living room, the one Frank and I had poured our hearts into. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, swept over the furniture we'd had for 20 years, the family photos on the mantel, the small scuff marks on the hardwood floor from 1,000 happy memories. "Your home is so quaint," she said. The word hung in the air, a polite insult wrapped in a compliment. I tried to bridge the gap I already felt widening between us. "Frank and I bought it when we were just starting out. It's nothing fancy, but it's filled with a lot of love." Tiffany gave that tight little smile again. "Well, that's what matters, isn't it?" Her tone made it clear she thought otherwise. "Kevin and I have been looking at some properties over in Lakeview Estates. Have you seen those new developments? They're absolutely gorgeous." Lakeview Estates was the most expensive neighborhood in our part of Ohio. The houses there looked like small castles, with 3-car garages and perfectly manicured lawns that rolled down to the water. The starting price was something I couldn't even comprehend. I caught Kevin's eye, and he quickly looked away, a faint flush on his cheeks. Their wedding 6 months later was an event. It was held at the Westfield Country Club, a place with a waiting list years long. 7 bridesmaids in designer gowns, ice sculptures, a 10-piece band. I felt like an alien in my best navy blue dress, which had seemed so elegant in the department store but now looked painfully plain among the sea of silk and jewels. I spent most of the reception at a small table with a few of Kevin's distant relatives. He stopped by only briefly, his tie already loosened. "Having a good time, Mom?" he asked, a sheen of sweat on his forehead from dancing. "Of course, sweetheart. Everything is beautiful," I lied. He looked relieved. "Great. Hey, Tiffany's dad is talking about bringing me into the business side of things at his company. Says I have potential." He was so excited, so full of dreams. How could I tell him that I felt a cold dread creeping into my heart? a feeling that he was being pulled into an orbit so far from mine that I might never get him back. After the honeymoon, they bought the house. A sprawling 6-bedroom colonial in Lakeview Estates with a gourmet kitchen and a backyard that looked like a park. "Isn't it perfect, Mom?" Kevin asked, his eyes shining as he showed me the master suite, which was bigger than my entire first floor. It was beautiful, but a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. "It's lovely, sweetheart. But are you sure you can afford this? I know you have a good salary, but with your student loans." Tiffany's smile was as brittle as ice. "My parents are helping with the down payment as a wedding gift. We've run the numbers. We can make it work." They said her parents were taking care of it. They said they could make it work. But what I didn't know then was that making it work had a completely different meaning, and that I was the one who was about to pay the price. The call started about a month after they moved in. It began small. Kevin's voice on the other end of the line, strained and apologetic. "Mom, I hate to ask, but we're in a bit of a bind. The property taxes were higher than we expected." I didn't hesitate. "How much do you need?" I asked, already opening my checkbook. I withdrew $5,000 from my savings the next day. It was a significant chunk of what I'd been putting away for my own retirement, for the day I couldn't work those long nursing shifts anymore. But my son needed me. That's what mattered. That became the pattern. The temporary emergencies that were never quite temporary. The air conditioning system needed a full replacement. Tiffany's company was downsizing and she needed to pay for new certifications to stay competitive. They had to replace the brand new hardwood floors because Tiffany decided she didn't like the color. Each time I dipped into my savings. Each time Kevin promised it was the last time, just until they got back on their feet. And each time the thank yous grew shorter, the calls less frequent. Then came the biggest request of all. He showed up at my house one evening alone. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework, looking down at his hands. "Mom," he began, his voice heavy. We're struggling with the mortgage. The interest rate adjusted up. We're 3 months behind." My heart sank. I already knew what was coming. "What are you asking, Kevin? If you could help with the payments for a while? Just until I get this promotion I'm up for. We don't want to lose the house, Mom. It's our home. Our home." The words echoed in my ears. This small house, the one filled with memories of his father, the one he'd suggested I sell to pay his tuition, this was our home. But I couldn't bear the thought of my son losing his. So I agreed. I told him I'd have to talk to my supervisor, Dr. Evans, about picking up more hours. At 60 years old, the overnight shifts were getting harder, but I would manage. For him. That night, I drained what was left of my savings and started working 60-hour weeks. For 3 years I paid their mortgage. Every single month a direct transfer from my account to theirs. I skipped lunches. I put off fixing the leaky faucet in my own bathroom. I ignored the strange noise my old car was making. During this time the distance grew. Sunday dinners became a rare occasion. Phone calls were short, filled with excuses. And then came Kevin's 30th birthday. I spent the whole day waiting by the phone, expecting a call, an invitation to a small family dinner, anything. The phone never rang. I told myself they were probably just busy, that they'd celebrate with me later. The next morning, I was out pulling a few weeds from my front garden when my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, leaned over the fence. She's a sweet woman but a notorious gossip. "Morning, Carol," she chirped. "That looked like some party last night. My niece saw the pictures Tiffany posted on Facebook. That cake was a work of art. Looked like the whole town was there." My blood ran cold. I felt the color drain from my face. I managed a weak smile. "Oh yes, it was quite something." I rushed inside, my hands shaking as I pulled up Facebook on my old desktop computer. And there it was. A whole album titled, Kevin's Fabulous 30th. Dozens of photos. Kevin and Tiffany, laughing with 100 of their friends at a lavish party at the country club. There were caterers, a DJ, a mountain of expensive gifts. And I, his mother, who was literally working herself to the bone to pay for the house they lived in, hadn't even been told about it. It was a public humiliation, a clear statement broadcast to the world. You are not part of this life we have built. The humiliation of that birthday was a deep cut. But I still held on, still made the transfer the next month, still told myself he was my son. I was a mother. It's what mothers do. But a different kind of attack, a far more brutal one, was on its way. The human body can only take so much. At 62, working 60-hour weeks, mostly on my feet, I was running on fumes. I'd been ignoring a persistent cough for weeks, pushing through the fatigue. One evening, my supervisor, Dr. Evans, found me leaning against the nurse's station, trying to catch my breath. He's a kind man, a widower a few years older than me, and he had a worried look in his eyes. He ordered a chest X-ray on the spot. The diagnosis was pneumonia, complicated by exhaustion and a weakened immune system. "You need complete rest, Carol," he insisted, his voice firm. "I'm putting you on medical leave for at least 4 weeks. This isn't negotiable." The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. Panic clawed at my throat. For the first time in years, I had to think about myself. "Called Kevin," Tiffany answered, her voice as cool as ever. "He's in a meeting," she said. "It's important, Tiffany. I need to talk to him about the mortgage payment." There was a pause. "What about it?" "I'm on medical leave," I said, my voice raspy from the cough. "Pneumonia. I won't be able to work extra shifts for a while. I was hoping you and Kevin could cover the mortgage until I'm back on my feet." The silence on the other end stretched into an uncomfortable void. Then her voice, hard as stone. "So you're saying you won't be sending the money this month?" The way she said it, like it was an obligation. A bill I had failed to pay. Not a sacrifice I had been making for 3 agonizing years. It felt like a punch to the gut. "I can't, Tiffany. I'm ill." "We're counting on that money, Carol," she cut in. "We have plans. We've already booked our ski trip to Aspen over the Christmas break." A ski trip to Aspen. They had money for a ski trip to Aspen, but not for their own mortgage. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "I've been covering your mortgage for 3 years," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in decades. "I think you can manage for 1 month while I recover from a serious illness." Her laugh was short and sharp, a shard of glass in my ear. "Right. Look, we all know you've been helping because you wanted to stay involved in our lives. That's fine. But don't try to use your health as leverage now." Leverage? I was speechless. I was paying for their entire lifestyle. And she called it wanting to be involved. "Please have Michael call me," I finally managed to say. He didn't call that night. Or the next. When he finally called 3 days later, it was the conversation that changed everything. The conversation that led to me standing in my kitchen, staring out at the snow. He was rushed, defensive. "Mom," Jenny told me, "I'm sorry you're not well, but we really need that payment. We've committed to hosting a pre-Christmas dinner for Jenny's work colleagues." And that's when I finally told him everything I'd been holding back. The years of extra shifts, the skipped meals, the leaky faucet I couldn't afford to fix. I laid it all bare. There was a long silence. Then he said the words that shattered the last piece of my heart. "So you're keeping track? I thought you were helping because you wanted to, not because you expected something in return." That was it. That was the moment everything broke. After that, the conversation devolved into the one about Christmas. The one where he told me I didn't fit in, that I would ruin the ambience. When I hung up the phone, I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. I walked into my bedroom, to the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed, the one that held all of Frank's things. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, beneath his old service medals and a stack of letters, was our life's paperwork. Deeds, wills, bank statements. It was time to stop being a sacrificial mother. It was time to become a survivor. The next morning, I felt a resolve I hadn't felt since Frank died. The grief and shock had solidified overnight into something hard and clear. A plan. My first stop was the bank. I walked up to the teller, a young woman named Sarah who always asked about my garden, and I closed the automatic transfer to Kevin and Tiffany's account. Permanently. Sarah gave me a concerned look but processed the request without a word. It was a small act, a few clicks on a computer, but it felt like I was taking back a piece of my soul. My second stop was a small law office downtown. Martin Goldstein had handled Frank's estate years ago. He was a kind, no-nonsense man. I sat across from his heavy oak desk and I told him everything. The verbal agreement, the 3 years of mortgage payments, the pneumonia, the Christmas invitation that wasn't. I left nothing out. He listened patiently, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back, his expression grim. Carol, without a written agreement, legally this could be seen as a gift. We could argue an implied contract, but it would be a messy, expensive fight. A fight against your own son. I don't want to sue him, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I just want to protect what I have left. He nodded. Then my advice is to document everything. And let them face the consequences. He paused, then his eyes narrowed slightly. There is one more thing. You mentioned home improvements. Did you ever co-sign anything for them? A loan? A line of credit? My blood ran cold. My mind flashed back to a year ago. Tiffany sitting at my kitchen table, all smiles and charm. They were remodeling the kitchen, she'd said. A home equity line of credit, a HELOC, was the smartest way to do it. It was just a formality, she'd assured me. They just needed my signature as a backup because of their debt-to-income ratio. I was so used to giving, so used to saying yes, that I had signed without a second thought. Yes, I whispered. A $50,000 line of credit. Martin's face was grim. Carol, I strongly advise you to check the status of that account. Immediately. If they default on that, the lender won't hesitate to come after you for the full amount. They could put a lien on this house. I left his office with my heart pounding in my ears. The bank that held the HELOC was across town. I drove there in a daze. After a tense 20 minutes of verifying my identity, a bank manager sat me down at his desk and turned his computer screen towards me. The current balance on the HELOC was $48,622. My mouth went dry. They had used almost the entire credit line. I scanned the transaction history. Dozens of withdrawals. And then I saw it. A cash withdrawal 2 weeks ago for $2,000. The location wasn't a hardware store or a contractor. It was a pawn shop in the next county over. Winners Pawn and Loan. A sick feeling washed over me. What could they have pawned that was worth $2,000? I rushed home, a terrible, unthinkable suspicion forming in my mind. I went straight to the den, to the mahogany box on the bookshelf where I kept Frank's most precious belongings. I opened it. His service medals were there. His father's pocket watch. But the velvet slot where his Rolex should have been was empty. It was a gift I'd saved for years to buy him for our 25th anniversary. He'd been so proud of it. After he died, I couldn't bear to look at it, but I could never part with it. A few weeks ago, Kevin had been over. He'd noticed it in the box. You know, Mom, he'd said, his voice full of concern. A watch like this needs to be professionally serviced every few years to keep its value. I can take it to a guy I know in the city for you. I had been so touched by his thoughtfulness. I had thanked him and handed him the watch. He hadn't taken it to be serviced. He had driven it straight to a pawn shop. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I stumbled back and sank into a chair. This wasn't just about my money anymore. This was a desecration. My son, my only child, had stolen a sacred memory of his dead father and sold it for cash. Taking my money was one thing. But this was an act of betrayal so profound, so monstrous. I knew there was no coming back from it. And I knew with absolute certainty what I had to do next, no matter what it cost me. The next morning there was no hesitation. The rage had burned away the grief, leaving behind a cold, hard purpose. I didn't call Kevin. I didn't scream or cry. I acted. My first stop was the pawn shop, Winners Pawn and Loan. It was a grim, dusty place that smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. A burly man with a weary face stood behind a counter protected by iron bars. I'm here about a watch, I said, my voice steady. A Rolex. It was brought in about 2 weeks ago by a young man named Kevin Peterson. He grunted, not looking up from his newspaper. We don't give out customer information. I reached into my purse and pulled out a photo of Frank wearing the watch, taken on our anniversary. I also pulled out the original receipt and certificate of authenticity, which I had kept in the mahogany box. I placed them on the counter. It wasn't his to sell, I said, my voice low and firm. It was stolen from me. It belonged to my late husband. Now you can either sell it back to me, or my next stop is the police department with these documents and a formal complaint. The man's eyes flickered from the papers to my face. He saw the look in my eyes. He saw I wasn't bluffing. He sighed a long, weary sound and disappeared into a back room. He returned a moment later and placed the Rolex on the counter. My heart ached seeing it there, under the harsh fluorescent lights. $2,000 plus our standard 20% fee to reclaim, he mumbled. $2,400. I wrote the check without flinching. As he was bagging it up, I said, I'd like to see the security footage from that day. He was about to refuse, but I just stared at him. He grumbled but turned a small monitor around on the counter and clicked through some files. And there he was. My son. On the screen he looked nervous, shifty, avoiding the camera. He handed over the watch, took the cash, and practically ran out of the store. Seeing it with my own eyes, the casualness of his betrayal cemented the last of my resolve. My next stop was the bank. I sat down with the same manager from the day before. I need to pay off the balance on the home equity line of credit, I said. All of it. And I want to close the account today. He looked at me stunned. Carol, that's over $48,000. Are you sure? There are substantial penalties for early withdrawal from a retirement fund. I am sure, I said. It was the inheritance Frank had left me, the nest egg we had built together for our old age. And I was about to burn through almost all of it to clean up my son's mess. But it wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. It was the only way to sever the financial cord, to protect myself from whatever hole Kevin was digging. 2 hours later it was done. The paperwork was signed, the funds transferred. I walked out of that bank feeling strangely light. I was poorer, yes. My financial future was now uncertain. But I was free. I had reclaimed the last piece of my husband, and I had cut the cancerous tie to my son's disastrous finances. As I drove home, I clutched the bag with the Rolex in it on the passenger seat. I had cut off their money supply. I had closed the line of credit they were bleeding dry. I had taken back the one thing that was not for sale. I thought for a fleeting moment that the worst was over. I thought that now they would finally have to face the consequences on their own. But I was wrong. I had underestimated the arrogance of the wealthy. I had underestimated how far they would go to protect their perfect, curated image. I didn't know that my actions had just set the stage for a direct confrontation, not with my broken son, but with a far more formidable and ruthless opponent. That evening, just as I was sitting down with a cup of tea, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find a man in an expensive cashmere coat standing on my porch. It was Thomas Vanderbilt, Tiffany's father. In all the years Kevin had been married to his daughter, the man had barely spoken 10 words to me. Mrs. Peterson, he said, his voice flat and devoid of warmth. He didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped past me into my living room, his eyes scanning my modest home with the same barely concealed disdain his daughter had shown years ago. Mr. Vanderbilt, I said, closing the door, my hand steady. This is a surprise. I'm sure it is, he said, remaining standing. This won't take long. I understand you've decided to withdraw your financial support from Michael and Tiffany's household. The way he phrased it, like I was a corporate sponsor pulling funding from a charity, made my blood boil. I have decided to focus on my own financial security. I corrected him, my voice calm. Kevin and Tiffany are adults. It's time they managed their own finances. His mouth tightened into a thin line. Be that as it may, your abrupt decision has created a significant hardship for them. The timing is particularly unfortunate. With the holidays, they have numerous social obligations. I just stared at him, waiting. Jennifer is quite distressed, he continued. She tells me you not only stopped the mortgage payments, but you also paid off and closed the line of credit they were relying on. A line of credit for which I was legally responsible, I pointed out. I was protecting myself. He waved a dismissive hand, as if my financial well-being was a trivial nuisance. Legalities aside, surely you understand the position this puts them in. Socially, they've made commitments based on certain financial expectations. Expectations that I would continue to work 60-hour weeks at age 62 to fund their lifestyle? I asked, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel he couldn't have missed. For the first time he looked slightly uncomfortable. Let's not be dramatic. The point is, this situation is causing my daughter considerable stress. We are hosting our annual Christmas Eve gala with several prominent families from the state senate and business community in attendance. The last thing we need is for our daughter and son-in-law to be distracted by financial worries. It reflects poorly on the family. And there it was. The real reason for his visit. Not concern for his daughter's well-being, but concern for his own reputation. "What exactly are you asking of me, Mr. Vanderbilt?" I asked. His tone shifted, becoming businesslike. "I'm proposing a compromise. If you resume the mortgage payments just temporarily through the new year, it would give them breathing room. It would allow them to maintain appearances." He reached inside his coat and pulled out a leather checkbook and an expensive-looking pen. "And I am prepared to offer you compensation for this inconvenience." I stared at him, speechless. This man, this incredibly wealthy and powerful man, was standing in my humble living room, offering to bribe me to continue paying for my own son's life. He wanted to pay me to enable my son, so his daughter wouldn't look bad at a Christmas party. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it was almost too much to comprehend. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "You want to pay me to continue paying my son's mortgage? Think of it as a consulting fee," he said smoothly, uncapping his pen. "A simple business arrangement." I finally found my voice. "Mr. Vanderbilt," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "my love for my son is not a business arrangement. My self-respect is not for sale. And my home is not a place where you can conduct sordid transactions. If you are so concerned about their financial situation and your social standing, I suggest you write them a check." I pointed toward the door. "And now, I'd like you to leave." He was genuinely shocked. It was clear no one had said no to him in a very long time. His face hardened. "I see Jennifer was right. You are being difficult. This is precisely why we felt it would be awkward to include you at Christmas." He put his checkbook away and walked to the door. As he left, he turned back, a final parting shot. "You know, many parents would be grateful their child married into a family of our standing. And many parents," I replied, opening the door for him, "would expect their child's in-laws to treat them with basic human decency. Merry Christmas, Mr. Vanderbilt." He left without another word. As the door clicked shut behind him, my legs finally felt weak, and I leaned against it, my heart hammering. He thought money could fix anything. He thought he could buy my dignity. But as I stood there, a grim realization settled in. This wasn't over. He would go straight to Kevin and Tiffany, and the fallout would be immediate. My phone, sitting on the end table, suddenly rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was Kevin. And I knew with absolute certainty he was going to be furious. I let the phone ring. I wasn't ready to face Kevin's rage, a rage fueled by his father-in-law's entitlement. I needed to breathe. I needed to remember who I was outside of being his mother. For the first time in years, I did something for myself. I called my old friend Grace, a retired teacher, and accepted her long-standing invitation to join her book club. The next few weeks were a revelation. I started saying yes. I went to the book club. I started volunteering at the community center. And I said yes when Dr. Evans, my old supervisor, invited me to the hospital's annual Christmas party. He found me standing awkwardly by the entrance, looking lovely in a simple dress. He spent the evening introducing me to people, not as Kevin's mom, but as Carol Peterson, the most competent nurse he'd ever worked with. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I felt respected. "You seem different tonight," he observed over dinner. "More present." He was right. I wasn't mentally calculating how soon I could leave to get some rest before my next grueling shift. I was just there, enjoying the music, the conversation, the simple pleasure of being treated like a person of value. At the end of the evening, he walked me to my car. "There's a chamber music concert at the university next weekend," he said, a little nervously. "I was wondering if you'd be interested in attending with me." I stopped. "Are you asking me on a date, Richard?" He smiled, a warm, genuine smile. "I suppose I am." "I'd like that very much," I said, surprising myself. That week, I also reconnected with my neighbor across the street, Sharon. We'd lived opposite each other for 30 years, but our interactions had been limited to polite waves. I impulsively knocked on her door one evening and asked for help with my Christmas lights. An hour later, we were sitting at her kitchen table, drinking hot cocoa and sharing stories about our late husbands, our gardens, our lives. It was so easy. A friendship had been waiting right across the street, and I had been too busy, too exhausted to ever reach for it. I even ran into David Chun, Kevin's childhood best friend, at the local nursery. He gave me a warm hug. It's been ages, Mrs. Peterson. We chatted for a moment, and then a shadow crossed his face. I don't see Kevin much anymore, he admitted quietly. Things changed after he married Tiffany. To be honest, it started to feel like your value to them was measured by what you could do for them socially or professionally. I guess I didn't measure up. He paused, then looked at me with such sympathy in his eyes. He also mentioned you've stopped helping them financially. I felt a flash of anger that Kevin was discussing our private affairs, but David quickly added, "Good for you. He was my best friend and I love him, but the way they live, it's changed him." His words were a painful validation. It wasn't just me. Others saw it too. The night of the concert with Richard felt like stepping into a different life. The music was beautiful. The dinner afterward was filled with easy laughter. He told me he'd wanted to ask me out for years, but I'd always seemed so emotionally unavailable. He was right. I had built my entire world around Kevin, leaving no room for anyone or anything else. He drove me home and walked me to my door. "I had a wonderful time, Barbara," he said. And then he leaned in and gave me a gentle, sweet kiss. It was just a brief touch of lips, but it sent a jolt through me. A feeling I thought was long dead and buried. As I stepped inside my house, giddy and feeling 20 years younger, I realized what was happening. I wasn't just surviving, I was starting to live. I was building a new life, one friendship, one concert, one simple yes at a time. I was finally putting myself first. I was still smiling about the kiss the next morning when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but it was local. I answered cautiously. "Barbara," a woman's voice said. It was strained, tight with an emotion I couldn't place. "It's Tiffany." I was stunned into silence. In all the years, she had never called me directly. I think we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "In person. And Michael can't know. Please." My mind raced. What could this be about? Was it a trap? Another attempt to manipulate me? But the raw fear in her voice sounded genuine. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe on Main Street in an hour. As I got ready, a sense of dread replaced the lightheartedness from the night before. I had a feeling that whatever Tiffany was about to tell me would pull me right back into the storm I was trying so desperately to escape. And as I walked into that cafe and saw her sitting in the corner, looking pale and terrified, I knew my life was about to get infinitely more complicated. The cafe was bustling with holiday shoppers, the air filled with the scent of coffee and cinnamon. Tiffany was huddled in a corner booth, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. The impeccable designer clothes hung on a frame that seemed to have shrunk. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she was nervously shredding a napkin into a pile of white fluff on the table. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down, her voice barely a whisper. "Michael doesn't know I'm here. I'd prefer he didn't find out." My guard was up. "What's this about, Tiffany?" She took a shaky breath and looked me straight in the eye. Her usual icy composure was gone, replaced by raw desperation. "Barbara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you know about the gambling?" The question hit me like a tidal wave. "Gambling? What are you talking about?" She studied my face, searching for any sign of deceit. When she found none, her shoulders slumped in what looked like a mixture of relief and despair. "You really didn't know." "I was afraid. Afraid maybe you've been covering for him all these years." "Covering for what?" I demanded, my voice sharp. "Tiffany, tell me what's going on." And then it all came pouring out. The story was uglier than anything I could have imagined. It had started about 2 years ago. Online betting sites, high-stakes poker rooms, sports books. She discovered it when their credit card was declined at a fancy restaurant. She confronted him, and he swore it was a hobby that had gotten out of hand, that he would stop. She had believed him. "He didn't stop, did he?" I said, the pieces of the last 3 years clicking into place with a sickening thud. She gave a bitter, humorless laugh. "Stop? No. He just got better at hiding it. He opened new accounts I couldn't access. Took out cash advances. Who knows what else? The mortgage payments I was making," I said, the words catching in my throat. "The money from the line of credit." She couldn't meet my eyes. She stared down at the shredded napkin. Some of it went to our expenses, but a lot of it, most of the big withdrawals. He was gambling with it, I finished for her. The air left my lungs. The extra shifts. The sleepless nights. The leaky faucet. I had been funding my son's addiction. The thought was so vile it made me physically ill. "I'm so sorry, Barbara," she whispered, tears finally spilling over and running down her pale cheeks. "I should have told you. I was too embarrassed. Too proud. I was terrified of what my father would do if he found out. Gambling, it's the one thing he would never forgive. His own father lost everything that way. How bad is it?" I asked, my voice flat. "It's bad," she admitted. "The mortgage is 4 months behind now, not just the one you knew about. We're in foreclosure. The credit cards are maxed out. They're threatening to repossess my car." She let out a shuddering breath. "He still thinks he's one big win away from getting it all back. He keeps talking about his system, the stolen watch, the $2,000 from the pawn shop. It hadn't been for bills. It had been for another bet. Another desperate attempt to chase his losses. Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice hard. "Because I'm at my breaking point," she said, her voice cracking. "Last night, he lost another $5,000. Money we don't have. I told him he needed help. Gamblers Anonymous. A therapist. Anything. He refused. He said I was overreacting." She looked up and the look in her eyes was pure terror. "Then he got ugly, Barbara. He said if I were a better wife, more supportive, he wouldn't need an escape. He blamed me. He blamed you. He said he knew his mother would bail him out again if things got really bad." The casual, entitled cruelty of that statement reignited my cold fury. "When I told him you'd cut him off for good, he lost it. He said things I can't repeat." She was shaking now. "Barbara, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Not just of losing the house but of him. The person he's become. It's like living with a stranger." In that moment I saw past the designer clothes and the polished exterior. I saw a frightened young woman whose life was imploding. "I've started looking at apartments," she whispered, as if confessing a terrible crime. "Just in case." A wave of something akin to pity washed over me. We had been adversaries, but we were both victims of the same destructive force. Before I could say anything, Tiffany's eyes darted towards the cafe window, her face turning white with fear. "Oh no," she breathed. I followed her gaze. A familiar car had just pulled into a parking spot right in front of the cafe. Kevin's car. "He followed me," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "He must have put a tracker on my phone." I looked from her terrified face to my son getting out of the car. His face a mask of thunderous rage. He was walking towards the entrance. He knew she was in here. And he knew she was with me. There was no time to think. My instincts, honed by 40 years of nursing in crisis situations, took over. I stood up, grabbing Tiffany's arm. Her skin was ice cold. "We're leaving," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Now." "Through the back." I threw a $20 bill on the table and pulled her towards the kitchen entrance at the rear of the cafe. The staff stared as we rushed past them, out the delivery door, and into the cold, snowy alleyway. We didn't stop running until we were in my old Ford. The doors locked, and I was peeling out of the parking lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. I saw him in my rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of the cafe, looking around wildly. The rage on his face was terrifying. "He's never been like this," Tiffany sobbed from the passenger seat. "Never." "It's the addiction," I said, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It changes them." There was only one place to go. My house. My sanctuary. The one place I thought I could be safe. It was Christmas Eve. The day that was supposed to be filled with peace and goodwill. Instead, I spent it with my terrified daughter-in-law, who was now a refugee in my guest room. We didn't talk much. We sat in silence, the unspoken tension thick enough to choke on, both of us waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped the next morning. Christmas Day. Around noon the doorbell rang. Not a friendly, festive ring but a hard, insistent pounding. We both knew who it was. Tiffany froze at the top of the stairs, her face ashen. "Stay here," I said quietly. I walked to the door, took a deep breath and opened it. He was standing on my porch, his face blotchy, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Where is she?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. He tried to push past me into the house. I planted my feet and held my ground. I might be a 62-year-old woman, but I had a strength born of righteous fury. "You are not coming into my house like this, Kevin." "So she is here," he sneered. "I knew it. She ran straight to you. Did she fill your head with lies? Did she tell you this is all my fault?" "She told me the truth," I said, my voice cold as the winter air. "She told me about the gambling, Kevin. She told me about the foreclosure. And I know about your father's watch." The mention of the watch made him flinch. For a second, a flicker of shame crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by rage. "That's none of your business. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have investments. It's a temporary setback." "Is that what you call it?" I shot back, my voice rising. "A temporary setback? Stealing from your own mother? Pawning your dead father's legacy? Drowning in debt while your wife lives in fear? You need help, Kevin. Professional help." "I don't need help," he roared, his fists clenched at his sides. "I need my wife. I need you to stop interfering." He took a step forward, his shadow falling over me. "Now get out of my way." "No," I said. It was the calmest word I had ever spoken, and the most powerful. "This is my home. You will not threaten anyone under my roof. I am asking you to leave. Now." He let out a bitter, disbelieving laugh. "You'd really choose her over your own son? On Christmas Day?" "This isn't about choosing," I said, my heart breaking even as I stood firm. "This is about stopping you from destroying yourself and everyone around you. If you do not leave my property right now, I will call the police." He stared at me, his jaw working. He saw the truth in my eyes. He saw that the woman who had always given in, always sacrificed, was gone. In her place was someone he didn't recognize. Finally, with a look of utter defeat, his shoulders slumped. "Fine," he spat. "I'll go. But you tell her this isn't over. She can't just walk away from our marriage." The words held a veiled threat that sent a chill down my spine. He turned and stalked down the snowy path to his car. He paused at the curb and looked back, and in that moment the rage was gone. He just looked small and lost, like the little boy who used to cry for me in the night. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry too, sweetheart," I whispered to the empty air after he drove away. I closed the door and leaned against it, my body trembling. At the top of the stairs, Tiffany was standing there, tears streaming down her face. "I heard everything," she said. "Thank you." I looked at her, my daughter-in-law, the woman I had once resented. "That's what family does," I said. "We protect each other." We stood there in the quiet house, two women who had survived the same storm. But we both knew, as the snow began to fall again outside, that the storm was far from over. The rest of Christmas Day was surreal. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. The confrontation with Kevin had left us both drained and shaken. The festive meal I had planned to take to a friend's house sat untouched on my kitchen counter. We were two women, adrift in the wreckage of our family. Then around 4 p.m. my doorbell rang again. My first instinct was panic, thinking Kevin had returned. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw my neighbor Sharon and my friend Grace standing on the porch, their arms laden with covered dishes. Behind them, Richard Evans was getting a casserole dish out of his car. I opened the door, confused. "What are you all doing here?" Grace bustled in, her face full of warmth. "I called Richard to wish him a Merry Christmas, and he mentioned your plans had changed. And Sharon called me because she saw Kevin's car here earlier and was worried. We put two and two together and decided you were not going to spend Christmas Day alone." Sharon followed her in, placing a homemade apple pie on the counter. "Families show up for each other," she said simply, giving me a quick, firm hug. Richard was the last to enter, holding a bottle of champagne. "I thought we might need this," he said, his eyes finding mine with a look of such understanding and tenderness it almost made me cry. And just like that, my quiet, somber house was filled with the sounds of friendship. They didn't ask a lot of questions. They saw Tiffany, pale and quiet, and they simply included her, offering her a plate, asking if she needed anything, treating her with a simple, uncomplicated kindness. We gathered around my small dining room table. It wasn't the lavish feast at the Vanderbilt's country club. It was a potluck of mismatched dishes. Grace's famous mashed potatoes, Sharon's green bean casserole, Richard's store-bought but delicious prime rib, and my now cold turkey. But it was the most meaningful meal I had ever eaten. We were a makeshift family, cobbled together from the pieces of broken plans and quiet crises. As we ate, Tiffany slowly started to relax. She even laughed at one of Sharon's outrageous stories about a disastrous online date. I watched her, and I saw the young woman she might have been without the crushing pressure of her family's expectations and her husband's addiction. After dinner, she turned to me, her expression serious. "I think I'm ready to call my parents." I nodded. "The den is quiet if you need privacy." She was gone for almost half an hour. When she came back, her eyes were red-rimmed, but a weight seemed to have been lifted from her shoulders. "They're coming tomorrow," she said quietly. "They want to talk." My dad, he was angry, of course, but not at me. He was furious at Kevin. And then he said he was proud of me for having the courage to face the truth. She looked at me. "They want to help." I knew what that help meant. The Vanderbilts didn't do things by halves. Their help wouldn't be gentle therapy sessions. It would be a swift, decisive, and legal severing of ties. They would protect their daughter and their family name with the full force of their wealth and influence. They would fund Kevin's treatment, but only on the condition that he signed divorce papers and agreed to a settlement that would leave him with nothing but his debts. It was a harsh solution, but it was also perhaps the only thing that could save him from himself. Later that evening, after everyone had gone and Tiffany had retired to the guest room, I sat alone in my living room, the lights of the Christmas tree twinkling. My life had been turned completely upside down. 6 weeks ago, I was a lonely, exhausted woman, begging for scraps of affection from my son. Tonight, I had hosted a Christmas dinner for a new kind of family. I had taken in my daughter-in-law. I had found the beginnings of love with a good man. I had been so afraid of being alone. But I was beginning to realize that being alone was far better than being lonely in a family that didn't value you. My future was uncertain. Kevin's path was dark and difficult. But for the first time in a very long time, as I looked around my quiet, peaceful home, I didn't feel fear. I felt hope. A year can change everything. The woman standing in this garden today is not the same woman who stood shaking on her porch last Christmas. My little house in Maple Creek is sold. Richard and I bought a new place together on the other side of town. A lovely ranch-style home with a big backyard perfect for a garden. After a lifetime of caring for others, I've finally found a partner to care for me. Kevin is 6 months sober. His journey has been anything but easy. He hit rock bottom, lost his house, his job, and his marriage. The Vanderbilts were true to their word. The divorce was swift. They paid for the best inpatient treatment program in the state. And for the first time, Kevin was forced to confront the wreckage he had created. Our relationship is rebuilding. It's a slow, cautious process. There are new rules, firm boundaries. The dynamic of mother and child is gone, replaced by two adults learning to navigate a new reality based on honesty, not obligation. He calls me every Sunday. Sometimes the calls are difficult, but he keeps calling. And for that I am grateful. Tiffany has thrived. Freed from the weight of expectations, she started her own small marketing firm. She lives in a chic apartment downtown and is slowly, carefully, paying off the debts that weren't her fault. We see each other sometimes for lunch. We are not mother and daughter, but there is a strange, unbreakable bond between us, a friendship forged in crisis. Tonight, I'm speaking at a support group for families of gambling addicts, something I never imagined I would do. I look around at the circle of faces, each one etched with the same love and pain I know so well. I tell them my story. I tell them about the hardest decision I ever made, to stop helping and start loving my son enough to let him fall. I tell them that setting a boundary, saying no, is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound love. It's the love that says, I will not watch you destroy yourself, and I will not let you take me down with you. It's the act that saved not only my life but his as well. My story had a painful beginning, but it has a peaceful middle. I didn't get the life I expected, but I got the life I deserved. A life filled with real love, genuine friendship, and a quiet, unshakable sense of my own worth. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it might help someone else out there feel a little less alone. If you've ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace in a family situation, I would be honored to hear about your experience in the comments below. Your stories matter. And if my journey resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories. You are not alone.